What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and this video I want to talk about Ghost of Yotei DLC. Will it happen? Should it happen? And then I have 4 different ideas that I want to run through in this video, okay? So, look, I was always going to do something like this. Coincidentally, just a few days ago, I think it was Game Informer, did a whole interview, and one of the questions that was asked was about DLC. And, generally it seems like they're 50-50, but like they would look at it or give it a try if there was something there, kind of the classic, game studio response. But they actually threw in one extra thing in that interview, one potential idea that I did not necessarily think about, and just the fact that they said it out loud made me think, I wonder if that, is legitimately something that they are looking at, like, even right now to do, okay? So, wanted to start there. I mean, will it get DLC? Well, technically, okay, Legends, like, can you consider that DLC? You might. I mean, it's a multiplayer, kind of standalone. Well, you need the game, so maybe it's not standalone. It's pretty close, and I'm so freaking excited for it. As I've said before, I think the combat is probably better this time around, and it's also harder. And to think about what Legends will be, I mean, I'll do videos about that as we get closer, but I think it's good because Legends for Tsushima was very difficult, especially when you got like the elites, like the highest tier and the highest difficulty. It gets nuts, in those multiplayer matches. I just replayed it, so doing it for Yotei I think would be nuts times 10. Okay, so you can count that. I mean, I'm talking about obviously pure single player, like Iki Island, right? Jin's final kind of swan song. So will they get it? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say they're going to do it. I think you just kind of honestly repeat exactly what you did with Ghost of Tsushima. With that, you had the opportunity to do, what they call director's cut, kind of that director's cut era. We haven't gotten that as much in the last 2-3 years, and I'm not necessarily mad about that, by the way, but, you have a chance to rebundle it, put it together, kind of sell it as a, a Miles Morales type thing and combine all that jazz. So I feel like to just do the 1-2-3 punch, right? Tsushima, then they had Legends, Iki Island, to do that again and to do Yotei, another Legends multiplayer, which is, again, by the way, such a good idea and such a smart thing, and then to do a DLC. I think that kind of makes it complete. I will say, and this will get into spoilers because we have to talk about the ending and kind of where it can go. I feel like Atsu's journey, like I feel good with where they ended it. Now, in the interview, they actually talked about that they don't see that. I think the question was like, do you see it as her ending? And the way they answered it was like, well, no, because like she has more life to live, right? There's more things to do. And it's like, okay, I get your answer, but you could also kind of read the way they said it as like, well, there's still more of a story to tell. See, it's different to say, like, does she still have more life to live, which is obviously yes, right? Versus, do you think there's more story to be told? Because you can imagine Jin's story after Iki Island. You can imagine Atsu's story after Yotei ends. It's different to say, there's actually something we think that could happen to her, though, that would make a good story that we want to tell you. Right? There's a difference there, right? So I just thought that was interesting, and I read that in the interview as well. So I'll still say yes. I'll say that maybe, next fall we get hit with the DLC, give them a full year, and we get hit with a 5, 6, 7 hour thing to formally conclude this. Now, I say formally conclude this because I don't know if it would actually be Atsu, and I think that's interesting, and that's why I want to go over these 4 ideas I have, okay? So, number 1, and technically this one's not my idea, but I want to start here, Atsu's father. This has so much potential, and I love this idea, and this was Sucker Punch, okay? So in the Game Informer interview, they said, we've seen people that have talked about wanting to see more with Atsu's father, and they said in that interview, they said, and we're thinking about how that could possibly, play itself out. So before I go deeper, I just want to say like a blanket statement, maybe I should have said it before this, but what I find very interesting about DLCs, especially like this, is they can be very restrictive. And I say interesting because it's not necessarily a good thing that it's restrictive, right? When I think about DLCs for these games, you think, okay, you built the game. You built a character. So Atsu is so developed, not just like her personality, but also like how you play as her, right? And to go so deep into somebody else, I feel like would take time. So that's kind of how I'm, thinking in my head. If you do Atsu's dad, now I think there's so much potential because you get just enough, right? You get the abandonment really of Lord Saito, right? You get her dad, very talented guy, very special guy, right? Good at his craft, but he also abandons, and we find out from, I think think actually it was Atsu's mom that said too, like, we know what Saito was doing, I think raiding and plundering and all that stuff, and they were not about that life, what Saito was doing to these people, so they left. Now, in the process of that abandonment, we actually know that he had a daughter, right? So you had the boys, the dragon and Spider, but there was a girl as well. We find that out from Spider, right? And that she died of starvation, I believe, because of that. So there is so much history there. And I think by the way, I didn't write it down, you could do something with the Spider and dragon. Maybe you could develop them even further because of their sister. But I think doing something with the dad, Atsu's dad, makes a lot of sense because there's clearly something there. He's highly respected. He's very talented, right? So I like that idea. I guess, again, to go back to like the blanket negative, is that you've developed Atsu so much, would you drop it to just tell a story of her dad? Because you'd have to have a new fighting style. He might only use one weapon. Like, you have to think about those things, right? How would he play? Because, yeah, you made like his character, the asset of his character, but you would need to really flesh that out. And factually, that would be more work than just doing Atsu again. Okay, I'm going to be bringing that up each time I do something like this, right? So that's number one. I think it actually has a lot of weight only because Sucker Punch said it. Otherwise, I wouldn't put much into it, and I wouldn't think they would pick this, even though it's a good idea. So let's go with number two, and I'll stick with non-Atsu, right? Just so we can say that again, and then we'll do Atsu-related things. So what about Lord Saito? I mean, I just kind of said that. I think I said this in my spoiler cast, I said this in the review, so there were times where he's just phenomenal. He's so good, and I mean, I think Sucker Punch has a way of doing this, even going back to like Sly with its villains, Infamous with its villains. Saito at opportunities or at times is so freaking good, and you kind of want that all the time. The issue is he's just not on screen enough, and also there was a couple times where I felt like there was kind of more for him to give, and he didn't. So it almost like they held back for whatever reason. But again, they got a thing with these characters, right? With like Lord Shimura in Ghost of Tsushima. So I guess I would say same thing for Saito as I would say for her dad, and it's the same era is the thing too, right? You'd be getting a younger version, and instead of doing her dad and what he did to Saito, how about you tell it from his perspective? Now this is the most risky, right? This is the one that I think has like 0% chance, but I think it would be so freaking cool because he's literally the leader, right? He gets this group together, this Yotei 6, and we know what he does kind of to each of them. We know what he means kind of to each of them, but like what's going through his head. We know kind of like his aspirations, through Yotei. I just feel and that's to say, by the way, like he's some amazing guy. Like we know what he did to Kitsune. We know what he did just in general to, again, get Atsu's father to betray, as he would say, right? So we know he's not like a good guy. This would literally be like a villain origin story, but I just feel he's got enough charisma and that honor kind of side to him. Like, I think there's enough there that if you wanted to do it, and again, if we're talking about, okay, like we're not strapped to Atsu, we're willing to flesh out somebody else, I think Saito makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you this too, he actually, in terms of like a design standpoint, is more fleshed out than her dad, because you think about the final fight. Actually, think about both fights you have versus Saito. He's got his movesets, right? He can switch weapons. So we know even from that boss fight that he's able to do pretty much everything. He's got the shield. I guess Atsu doesn't have a shield. He can pretty much do what she can do, and he's got like a different moveset involved to it. So he's kind of already developed a little bit from like a gameplay perspective. Like if they wanted to go in and say, okay, well, how would he fight versus just thugs, on the street? You'd be able to do it, I think, easier than you'd be able to do it with Atsu's dad. So just want to throw that in because maybe that helps the case. Maybe he's like a 1% chance, likelihood. But I like that idea personally. I don't know about them. Okay, final two, and they're both Atsu, so let's do them kind of back to back. So number one is Atsu's war that she fought in right before Ghost of Yotei. So that's one. And number two is some sort of post-game story with Atsu and Kiku. Okay, let me start there because I think that's the safe one. We talked about like what Sucker Punch should do next. There's like a safe option. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it a safe option. I think the story of Atsu and Kiku post Yotei is the most obvious, right? It's the safest. It is the most like, okay, well, you're taking this character, and instead of filling in something that happened like in the middle or in the beginning, telling a prequel type thing, you're just doing like an epilogue, right? And I mean, they literally did that with Jin, so it follows history. Like, it makes sense. Now, you could argue like Festival of Blood was something so different for Infamous, like it was kind of almost a side thing, like an Undead Nightmare type thing at the time. So they have had history with doing both. You know, they can tell epilogues, but they can also kind of just do a random, like, it's kind of during it, but not really. It's kind of just like an alternate reality type thing. And I mean, like Icky Island, even a little bit, kind of meshing those two things together as well. So I like the idea. Like, I'm not opposed to any of these, all four, to be honest with you. If there's a story to be told, then tell it. Like I said, though, I just feel Atsu and Kiku, like, I'm good. I'm good with where they ended. I don't think you have to, like, is there a mourning process over Jubei? Yeah. You know, is there, you know, Atsu's kind of there for Kiku in the way that nobody was there for her after losing everyone, you know, and Kiku in that way has kind of lost everyone except now that Atsu is there. So, you know, I don't know. I kind of like just imagining where that goes. I like imagining like they're together and she'll train Kiku and she's kind of like semi-retired. Maybe she'll come out for like, you know, bounties or something. But, you know, she's dropped that idea of revenge, you know, and like the desire that I need to take people out just to get, like, I like that, you know. So to go back into that would be very risky, I think, to her character and her character arc. But, you know, maybe there's somebody that threatens them, you know, maybe they're living life good. 2 years later, Kiku's a little bit older and somebody attacks their house, right? And it's a new villain, a new arc. It's shorter. It's not as big of a deal, you know, as Saito, and you deal with it, right? So again, kind of safe, kind of by the books. You kind of be able to predict some of the stuff. That's where I feel they could go there. It's not a bad one. It's just a safe one, you know? And then the other one, like I said, her war. So she mentions it a lot kind of in the beginning of the game, and then she drops it, I think, throughout the rest of the game. But early on, you learn through her that she fought in this war, and that's really what kind of got her ready for this entire thing. So she wasn't searching for the Yotei 6 for 16 years. You know, she got stabbed to the tree, and then 16 years later, here we are. Those 16 years were largely, it was her getting ready, right? It was her training, but she fought in an entire war, and that's kind of known in the region of Yotei, by the way, right? She fought to get ready and to kind of have the abilities that she has at the beginning of Yotei. That's all because of that war. Now, pro con here, right? Pro being, I like the time period. I like it being a prologue, kind of like in my head. You know, I like that it's a little bit different, I guess, right? The con, again, from a gameplay perspective, is you're actually weakening her entirely, you know, because now not only would she have to go all the way back to what she was good at and knew in the beginning of Yotei, technically, she wouldn't even know that stuff. Now, there's potential of, like, her meeting different masters, right? Or just people in the war, and even a friendship, even a relationship. You know, you want a romance partner. You can find things there, and you can have loss, you can have betrayal, you can have friendship, you can have all of these different kind of emotions, some of which, by the way, she didn't really even experience in the base game. You can give her that stuff in a prologue. Now, the issue is those characters have to all die, or they can't come with her after the war. And again, you really have to nuke her. I mean, just like factually, she could only use a sword, and her move set would be very like standard, very limited, you know, because that's just the time in her life. So that's the tough thing. That's actually what I think would really hold it back. I think the storytelling could absolutely be there, because you can kind of do anything and you just cut it off, right? Like, again, it's kind of like, well, you'll know the end of the story because you'll know these characters don't make it, or you'll know that Atsu has to leave them or whatever, right? But I feel like there's a lot of story you can just make up in that time period. The only thing, that's more gameplay. You know, gameplay, I think you'd be very, very limited to it because she's just learning, you know, and whatever she learns, because she can't learn things that she doesn't use in Yotei, right? Like, you can't do that. So whatever she learns, you have to almost get her to the point of the beginning of Yotei, and she's not all that knowledgeable in the beginning of Yotei. You know, she trains with all of these masters throughout Yotei to get better, so you'd have to put her before that, you know, so it would be kind of limiting in that perspective. But I think you got 4 good choices, to be honest with you. 2 good Atsu ones and 2 good non-Atsu ones. And hearing, again, even just about her dad, I actually kind of want them to go for it and not even do Atsu. I like her probably more than most people like her on the internet, to be honest with you. But if you want to leave her and you want to really try something and go with somebody that's not her as DLC, which is risky and it's kind of different, it's kind of weird, I would be for that. I really would. I think that's the more risky option. The safe one, like I said, is it's kind of just Atsu and Kiku, you know, post Yotei, which is probably what they'll do, to be honest. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.